Okay. When I first started using the eraser tool, I thought I was drawing with it too. It had me very confused. First, I'll show you this little figure 8 here in the upper left corner of your screen opens and closes the node editing tools, and your eraser tool is this white rectangle, or you can press F8 to access the eraser. My first frustration came because I was trying to erase only one layer when there was another layer underneath. So I just thought I would show you some different ways that you might use the eraser tool and how it works. When you click on the eraser tool, you get a size window up at the top where you can change the thickness in millimeters of your erase line, or you can select whether you want to erase or inverse erase. Inverse erase is a draw. So Brian showed us some things about using this. If you just have a single shape, you can just use your mouse and draw an irregular shape, and it will just remove the color like you would expect it to. If you wanted it to be a straight line, I'll use Control-Z to undo that. If you wanted it to be a straight line to erase, which I use very frequently, you press the Control key, then you click the mouse, and you drag, and wherever you release is where that line will be. You can also make it perfectly horizontal or vertical, and you can tell when it's horizontal or vertical when you get the green line at the top and the bottom of your red line there that you're erasing. And right now I'm still holding the control and I'm still holding the mouse. And when I release, then it erases. Now, if you were trying to erase the yellow, but there was a background that you'd forgotten about, I'll hold the Control key down again and click and drag here. Then I get an interesting effect. Right here, my mouse is very sensitive and it released there. And then if I click on the selection tool to get out of erase mode and I move this, you'll see that it erased through this and it erased through this, and then the place where my mouse lifted up, it didn't erase that. So when you erase something, it's going to erase through all layers. If you were just trying to erase on, let's say, a top layer, then you would have to select the layer that's behind and click on the eye icon on the right side of the screen with the shapes on their own layers to hide that other layer. So now if I wanted to use the eraser tool on this yellow shape, hold a Control and drag, then if I look at the green behind it, we'll see it's not cut, but I wasn't over the green anyway. Let me do that again, and I'll erase it over here. I'll hold the Control, click, and you have to have the eraser clicked. Control, click, and drag. Now you see that it cut through the blue shape and made an eraser there, eraser. And here it made an eraser, but on the green part it didn't. Now also when you're using the eraser tool, you'll notice that the two pieces don't separate. They remain together unless you do a split or a break to break those apart. Then you can deselect and then you can move apart. There are advantages and disadvantages to using the eraser. With this, when you use the eraser, you're going to get lots and lots of nodes. You can click on the pen tool or the pencil tool, and well, you won't see, you'll see break lines on those. In order to see the nodes, you would go to the wrench icon on the bottom and view or see nodes on that, and you see that there are lots and lots of nodes here. And that's a disadvantage when using the eraser tool. You get lots and lots of nodes. It might be better if you wanted to erase this whole piece over here, instead of using the eraser tool, and I'll just turn the nodes off there, instead of using the eraser tool, you might want to click the node editing tool and just select a little section by clicking with your mouse and then hitting the delete key. And when you do that on either side, you lose the color, so you know you've broken it. Then you can click on the draw tool and left click here and then right click here, and you get a perfectly straight piece that has, and we'll check the nodes on this now, nodes on matte, where you have no intermediate nodes in here, and that would allow you to reshape your line, move it, edit it, all in one movement, which is a whole lot easier than here's our original line here. If you try to move it, you only can move in between nodes. So if you have a big section that you need to erase, like, let's see, if we wanted to separate this, split, if you wanted to just get rid of this, you might be better off using this node editing tool. And again, I just select a little piece of it, hit delete, and select another piece, then use the node editing on the green dots to connect the dots, left click and right click, and then we have a segment here. I can again split, so I can get rid of the other line, and I still have a nice straight line here to work with on the node editing if I wanted to change the handles or change the curve. So that's something, I use the eraser tool a lot, but sometimes it's better to use the node editing. So I'm going to use Control Z to undo all of that. Any questions so far? Control Z. I'm just getting rid of all of my erasers so I can come back here. The other times, yes?
Well, there was one question, and I don't understand this. I don't know if it's what you were doing. So Karchik asked, would that also work for a circle, that it goes around an image which touches one foot over image and touches other foot? So I'm not sure. I don't know. Karchik, maybe you can reword that to...
So I've got a circle, and it's going to touch here and here, and...
oh, she says like a rainbow.
Well, let me show the frame here, because I think that'll might deal with part of the question. I'm not sure. But when we have an inside shape, sometimes we have something behind it that we're hoping we maybe want to change this shape a little. And when we're erasing, sometimes this other piece gets in the way. I'm going to select all, Control A, and type S to just stack it all. And I have a complicated design. And this is where I used to think that I was drawing. I wasn't drawing, but it looked like I was. I'm going to hold the Control key, and I'm just going to erase right here. And I'm going to turn off these nodes. So it looks like I drew a white line, doesn't it? But I really didn't draw a white line. What I did was I erased part of the blue, I erased yellow, and I erased green. So really I did do an eraser all the way through all layers. it just looks like I drew a line. And that was very frustrating when I was first starting this, is I thought it was drawing and it wasn't. And then I'd go to inverse eraser and mess myself all up. So if I want to, even if you see it here, let's say you locked the yellow layer by clicking on the lock icon and you did an erase all the way through, you're still going to cut through the locked layer because it is showing. So all the layers that you can see will be cut when you erase. So if you don't want to cut the background layer, let's say if you were doing a rainbow and you didn't want to erase some of the design that's in there, you want to make sure that the parts you don't want to cut, let's say I didn't want to cut the green, are not visible. You hide it by clicking on the eye icon. Then when you erase through the things that are showing, and then you don't erase through the ones that are not showing, like that. The other option is to, and I'll get back to that other question, maybe we'll get some, if you can give us a little more information about what you want, Card Check, I can maybe address that. When you click on the eraser, you also get the option of making fat lines. So maybe I want to do it 5 millimeters. I get a real fat line. Now I use fat lines sometimes if I have lots of area that I want to erase. But sometimes I use a very, very thin line if I want to cut something in half. And you can go as small as 0.25. And sometimes I want to break a piece in half. And you can see where the middle line is with the X here. Sometimes it's very helpful to use a snapping there, let's say. And then you can, if your eraser is set to really tiny, and I want to cut something in half, I don't lose much of the design, and then I can split it, and I have two equal pieces, which is a handy way to do it. Now you could use the knife, but I don't use the knife very much. I use the eraser more than that. And this is probably the most common way that I use when I want to split off a part of the design. Maybe if I had that rainbow and I had a foot that I didn't want in the rainbow and I wanted to get rid of the foot, I might trim the foot using this eraser set to 0.25. That's if, let's say I wanted to cut this little tip off of this triangle. I didn't need it. I didn't want anything outside the square. I'd put it outside of the triangle, hold the Control key, and drag straight across, and then I can split, and then I can remove that piece that I didn't want. And that's how I use the tiny eraser most of all. Now I know Brian likes to use the knife. I just sometimes the knife is a good thing to use, and sometimes it creates open paths that you have to close again, so you might want to not use it if you don't want to create an open path. The nice thing about using the eraser is it always creates closed paths. You notice it all kept its color, so it still has lines on it. Now the other option that you have with the eraser is to draw with it, and I use this a lot too. If you click on inverse eraser and you put the thickness that you want and you want to draw a line that's maybe connecting some objects, I can click on the eraser, then I can click and drag and release, and you notice that the design on top, the inverse eraser automatically connects to the design on top, but it doesn't connect to the line on the bottom. But it does give me the ability to select both and then weld, so that now I have a connecting line. And I call these bridges. So you can create as many bridges as you want. You can do thick bridges or thin bridges. And notice this time, since they're both the same shape, when I used it, it automatically welded both of them together. And even though I crossed over the line, it's still welded. Now this little piece here, I lifted up. Let's see what happened there. It did, I think my mouse went back on itself, so then that's where I got some erasing instead of drawing. And I break it apart. So I have an extra piece in there that I can select and get rid of. But when my mouse went back on itself, I actually erased instead of drawing. So let me undo that. And if I draw, click on eraser, I have inverse selected. And it drew, you see that it covered some of the lines here. Then I can select all, back out of this a little, and I can weld, and it all welds together as one if I want to do that. So keep in mind that if you're drawing bridges, the bridges are drawn from the design that's on the top layer. If they're both on the same layer, let's see what happens. If I put them both on the same layer and I want to make a bridge with an inverse eraser, let's see what happens. It still does not connect them until I weld.
Julie?
Yes.
Julie, if you join them,
Okay.
you can join them and then they will.
So I've got it joined, and I've got it joined by clicking on that. That puts them the same color, and then I draw between them. I'll hold the control. Then you see, I'll zoom in a little so you can see that it did connect them. So joining is something, if you're trying to create a bridge from one shape to another using the eraser, you would want to join the pieces first. Okay, so the place where I use the eraser most often is when I'm doing letters and I want to create stencil letters. And so if I take a font this is a stencil font already, but let me take this one, and this has stencil letters for the E already, no centers, but the O doesn't have breaks in them. So I would use, to create stencil letters, I would probably use a 1mm and hold the control key to get nice straight lines right down the center. So I click and drag, and I put my eraser right through the plus and release. Oh, but I forgot the inverse. So undo, you have to make sure it's not on inverse. Then you can click and drag, and then that separates the pieces of the letter so you don't lose them on a stencil, but you still have to do a break. Well, I did a join. You have to do a split so the pieces will be separate. And probably it depends on the style of the letter. This might not be big enough, so you might need to make a little fatter eraser, maybe a 3mm. So holding the control key, go down the middle, and then you're for sure not going to have those centers falling out and getting lost. So that's how I most frequently use the eraser. When I use the inverse eraser when I want to connect letters. Let's say I want to form a connection. This is not a good font for that, but let's say that I want to connect this letter to this one so it's a connected word. I might just drag across here. And I don't like crooked lines, so I'm going to hold Control so that I could make connected words. I would usually do this on a more curvy font. This is creating bridges. So if you have a font that has a tail, let's see. I have to get out of note editing mode before you can go back to adding a font. So you can pick a font that maybe has a more cursive style, and then you can connect letters. This one I'd use a smaller connector because they're thinner. And again, I do straight line, click and drag. And maybe I'd like to have a connector at the bottom here. I could move these letters so they're closer together, but this is just another idea. How you might connect letters.